Good afternoon, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome back to Beyond the Production. This is our first live interview series to kick off 2021. If you're joining us for the first time, Beyond the Production is Opera San Antonio's live interview series that takes artists off the stage and into our community to share their experiences in the operatic arts. My name is Lauren Meeker, and I am the General and Artistic Director of Opera San Antonio. And joining me today, as always, is my fabulous partner in crime, Francesco Miliotto. Hi, Francesco.
Hi, Lauren. How are you today?
I am excellent. Welcome to 2021.
Yes, thank you so much. Welcome to you too. Happy New Year.
Thank you. So for anybody who's joining us for the first time, maybe Francesco Miliotto is Opera San Antonio's amazing music director. Whoop, whoop. We love you. Thank you for being here. For anybody joining us live, thank you for joining live. If you're watching later on YouTube or Facebook, thank you for watching us throughout the coming weeks. All of these interviews from this series can be found on Opera San Antonio's YouTube channel. We have a whole playlist called Beyond the Production. And you'll also see them stored under the video sections of our Facebook page. Francesco.
Yes.
I am super duper excited, and I think I'm echoing your sentiments.
100%.
And I say that we're completing a Lyric Opera of Chicago love triangle today.
Yes.
With our amazingly talented guest, Matthew Ozawa. I'm going to add Matthew in right now. Ta-da! Hi, Matthew.
Ta-da. Hello, friend.
Hey, Matthew. How are you?
Good, good. Happy 2021.
Yes.
Thank you.
And may it be a happy 2021.
Yes, indeed.
Well, we're kicking off with Matthew, which is already such a joyful way to start the new year, I have to say. We've also got some people like James McCutcheon, who's on our board, joining us and saying that he's excited to participate today. We're excited for you too, James. Thank you for joining. And another colleague of ours, Naila Bansi, is joining. Really looking forward to the conversation. We are too. Oh, and I know we all know this lovely gentleman. Hi, Alan.
Hello, Alan.
Hey, Alan.
Welcome, welcome. So from those who may not know, I said little love triangle because Francesco and Matthew and I all have very close ties to Lyric Opera of Chicago. And part of what we want to talk about today, as this has become an interview series that is sort of like, this is your life as an artist. We want to talk about, Matthew's beginnings, but also get us up into all of our experiences at the Lyric and beyond. So that's sort of our trajectory today.
Yes. But Matthew, I do want to know one thing, because you're we've known each other for quite a while, but we've never really sat down and discussed our histories from the beginning. We're always talking about what we're working on, what we're doing, and how we are. But what is the first experience, the first artistic experience that inspired you for anything, music, art, anything like that? What was that first sort of experience?
That is a great question. I think, charting back to the beginning of my life, right? That's a while ago. I look really young, but I'm actually quite old.
You look great, Matthew.
Thank you. I feel a little weathered from the pandemic, but doing well. I think it was when I was 3 years old. My parents took me to a performance. Motorcycle outside. Took me to a performance of The Rite of Spring by Stravinsky. And apparently I sat there quietly, rapt with glee and attention the entire time. And I think that's when they knew I might actually maybe love the performing arts.
Wow. Was it the full ballet, or was it just like an orchestra
concert, just an orchestra performance?
Wow. That's pretty amazing for a 3-year-old. That's pretty incredible. Do you remember? I mean, of course, maybe you don't remember, but what would it have been that you might have connected later that might have inspired you? What do you think it was? Rhythm, the orchestration?
I do. Yes, I think all of the above. The rhythm, I think the different instruments and how they were layered in, and sort of the percussiveness and the drive of it simultaneously. All the wind instruments, and I don't know. There's something about it that even to this day, I love The Rite of Spring and I love Stravinsky. Yes. But there is something, I'm sure, as a little kid, just kept my attention the entire time.
It's amazing. I love that piece. All three operas, or all three ballets, but wow.
I think it's always so interesting to hear what sparks an artist and when in their life. And I find this fascinating that was your experience at 3 years old. I know, Matthew, as who you are today as an artist is multidisciplinary. So you've clearly taken that spark and applied it to interest across the board in the performing and visual arts. So if that's your spark experience, what do you remember early on about being your first hands-on experiences within the arts and developing your voice as an artist?
Right. I would say that singing in a choir, singing in a boys' choir in particular for an Episcopal church, and we were hired out by San Diego Opera to supplement the children's chorus. So at an early age, I was in the children's chorus for Tosca, Carmen, Bohème. I was not allowed to be in Werther, unfortunately. Because I was not Caucasian.
We should talk about that for a hot second, because I think that's not to call the production or the company out, but I do think that's a sign of how even you and I as directors, and Francesco helping me with casting, we're starting to blow some of those old, you need to be of a certain ethnicity or race right out of the water when we're casting traditional pieces. Would you agree?
Yes, entirely. I mean, and the fact that, we are having so many conversations right now about what does it mean to belong? How do we create access? Who is furthest from the table, or who feels barred from being able to appreciate or enjoy or participate. I will say that was a formative experience early on for me to say, okay, maybe performance is not for me. To realize that I was different because I couldn't participate in Werther along with my other friends. And this was, when I was really, really young. Simultaneously, San Diego Opera at the time, they had every single performance they had opened to students. And so I attended every dress rehearsal, and during those intermissions, they would take out the curtain and show the set being moved, and, the singers leaving the stage and spraying the stage, with mist to create humidity. And I remember that really was pivotal for, I think, the journey that ended up kind of bringing me to stage direction.
That's great. I'm going to give another shout out to another board member who's joining us, Diana Pena, who's saying such an important conversation. Thank you. We think it is too. I know talking about casting in general, and also how to embrace diverse communities and not just look at how a piece was conceived when it was originally written, which is so much of the operatic repertoire, we get to think outside the box on now. But so I'm sorry that was your early experience, Matthew, but I'm glad we've come so far since then.
Yes. Yes. And kudos to you and Opera San Antonio for having these conversations and becoming champions of how we investigate this material.
Well, we're trying, and we all have much more trying to do, that's for sure. But to that end, Matthew, I want to double that compliment back around to you, because I think you've been exploring that, in all of the various facets of the work that you've been doing, whether that's as a stage director, when you started your own company, which we'll talk about a little bit more, your operatic work, your visual work, and your theatrical work. And so I know there's a long story that talks about how you started to use all of those disciplines.
Now there's Matthew for me. I want to pull you back to where we were on what we were talking about, inspirations and beginnings, but there's a musical connection here. I mean, not everybody might know that you played an instrument.
I did.
Or you still play an instrument, for all I know.
I still play the instrument.
You still play the instrument.
Yes.
Let's bring us back to that and college and that journey that, it's always important, always handy.
It is always handy. I think that people often ask me, what would you describe yourself as? And even though, yes, I'm a stage director, I am a musician. I think I come to it from the music first and foremost, because I was an orchestral musician for so long. I played the clarinet for 14 years. I went to Oberlin Conservatory for clarinet performance. So I thought I was going to be in an orchestra for the rest of my life. And I think that that's what I wanted. And I was excited to be behind the scenes or in the pit playing. But I just loved music, and I loved the ensemble nature of creating music with others. and that fine-tunedness that you have to have, not only with in terms of intonation, but just how do you express yourself through your instrument. So that was something I absolutely loved. And then unfortunately in college, I switched gears. And I ended up switching into getting a degree in theater and a degree in musicology.
Why did you switch gears, Matthew? What was it that in your brain or your body that said the clarinet and just that path is not enough for me? There's something else I want to explore.
Yeah, and I know we'll end up talking about my teaching path as well. But actually, it was a professor at Oberlin who really had said to me, hey, there are not many clarinet positions open in many orchestras. So the path is really, really difficult. You'll probably be waiting for a very long time or auditioning against so many different people. And if you have, interests in other areas, maybe you should explore them while you're at Oberlin. And that is, I think, when I realized, I'm good as a clarinetist. I made it this far. But I am so passionate about so many different things, theater, dance, visual art, history, psychology, et cetera, et cetera. And so I started to dabble in other areas, and that led me into directing once I was in the theater department. And I realized how much I absolutely loved it, and I loved working with people.
Did musicology play a little bit of a role in that switch? Was there something or some era or something? Because obviously so many musicologists have a specific focused time, era, or discipline.
Yes.
What was your area of
My
expertise there?
area of expertise was 20th century music, in particular, opera in the US after 1950.
Wow, that is super specific. I love that.
Pretty specific.
No one knows that. Actually, this is the first time I've ever voiced that.
Breaking news on Beyond the Production.
Actually, this is a great story too, is that in one of my courses with Claudia McDonald, we made a field trip to Lyric Opera of Chicago to see Regina. And we sat in the very last row of the theater. And during the intermission, patrons who had been sitting on the bottom level came all the way to the top and gave two of us tickets to sit in the orchestra level. Wow. And I have to say, there was something about that moment of walking, not only being in the Lyric Opera House, which is just so incredible, but seeing a performance, way up in the nosebleeds, and then getting to see it, up close and personal, that was so transformative and magical. And I remember thinking, there's no way I'll ever be able to work here, but isn't this environment just completely breathtaking and amazing? And the fact that they're doing this piece that is so unusual, that was right up my alley. Yeah,
I mean, that place is as inspirational as it gets. Lyric Opera, walking into there every day. We've all been so lucky.
The Art Deco, and then we all ended up there. Yeah,
I know, right? But tell me, sorry, Lauren, I have one more question.
You're good.
Why opera in America after who just walking around goes, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to do clarinet. I think I'm going to do some musicology, and then I'm going to pick this thing. I'm connecting right now with Stravinsky's Rite of Spring in your 3-year-old mind.
Yes.
But what on earth? You must have seen something, liked something, heard a composer, played something. You must have done something to merit that road of that specific.
Very specific. It was a number of things. I mean, I think it's, of course, what was being performed in the US. I'm trying to really go back into the Rolodex of life history to be what was the spark? But I do know that at the time I was really interested in Tan Dun, Bright Shang, sort of what works were being done that were sort of marrying different cultures within the form of opera. And simultaneously, I remember seeing and listening to a performance of Atlas by Meredith Monk that was done at Houston Grand Opera. And there just was I think, an interesting kind of everything felt very experimental, and it felt like anything was possible. And musically, I didn't know what was going to happen. And same with the narrative. And there seemed to be so many possibilities. And, it wasn't women necessarily dying. And I mean, I think were so many different topics and musical qualities that I felt that I could keep exploring over and over again. In addition to, of course, all the classic American rep that I absolutely loved and delved into. So that is really kind of unusual. But yeah, I just.
Did you have any opera experience before? Like, did you play in all the pits? What was your connection to opera? I can understand theater, musical theater, but then how did you make that connection? Was it from playing, or was it from literal inspiration?
I think it was first singing in Carmen and Bohème and Tosca at San Diego Opera. So I think that was, but what was interesting is that out of all the shows that I got to see as a kid, the performances that really I gravitated to were performances like Rappaccini's Daughter. They did Rappaccini's Daughter, Werther. It was all this sort of more unusual, what we consider more unusual or less performed rep that I was really attracted to. And then, yes, I performed in the pit for many, many operas in Singapore because I lived abroad. I lived in Singapore for 5 years and went to a British high school. And so I was performing in the pit for Fledermaus and Flute and Macbeth. And so I got used to kind of being part of the narrative in that sense, but not being able to see anything. And I think that was interesting too, of sitting in the orchestra pit, really delving into the music, but having no clue what was happening on the stage.
Incredible. That's a great exercise for the imagination as well.
Yeah.
So you marry those worlds together, which seem perfectly marryable. And you have this degree. Oh, Alan, I want to show this comment because Alan is saying he saw the Rappaccini's Daughter, which was done in Philly, and even another even rarer version. So yay for rare operas. I think this group in particular really loves them. But so you put this this path together for yourself in school. And I think every artist that I've talked to, everyone we've interviewed so far in this series, then has to sort of go, okay, now what? Or how do I figure out what my next step is? What do I do with this degree? Now that I found this subject that I'm really excited about. What did you do, Matthew?
So what I did is I worked for the Santa Fe Opera as an apprentice in what they call orchestra services.
Okay.
So I basically was working with the orchestra all summer. And of course, Santa Fe does 5 shows in rep.
Right.
So I was there mopping and sweeping the orchestra pit every day and changing out all the music stands and the chairs. And then I would sit there in the orchestra pit for all these different performances. And of course, because I was, had been an orchestral musician, I absolutely loved it. I was able to watch, Alan Gilbert. I mean, just so many great conductors. And simultaneously, Santa Fe Opera has, of course, the trend yearly of doing some new work or an unusual work. And so, of course, I was always excited about that. And I got spotted at the end of Santa Fe Opera's season. They do something called the apprentice scenes, where they let the apprentice singers sing scenes. And I don't know if many people know this, but they allow the apprentices who are in all these different departments, props, scenic, wardrobe, etc. They allow the apprentices to try their hand at a different skill that they may not normally do for the apprentice scenes to learn and see if that is something that they're excited by. And so I ended up being a stage manager for the apprentice scenes. And I was spotted by Rupert Hemmings, who's now at LA Opera, and Jen Good, who's now at San Francisco Opera. They both were the production stage managers. And they really were my fairy godparents who said, hey, you have a skill. You need to come back next summer in stage management. So I then, I now have had since 2004. How many years is that?
It's a few. We'll just go with that. Just a few.
A few years.
17.
16, 17. So I've had a long history with Santa Fe, from being an apprentice to working in stage management for a couple of years, then as an assistant director, then directing the scenes program a few times, and then eventually directing Butterfly 2 years ago. So that is sort of where I guess my career kind of took off. And lo and behold, and this is really so wild, Jen Good at the time was working at Lyric Opera of Chicago, and a stage management position opened up there. And that is how I landed a job at Lyric Opera in my early 20s.
Wow.
Great.
Which then has been now what? I don't know, 15 years?
A few years less than a few years ago.
A few years less, yes. Yes.
Alan's asking an interesting question here. Did you work with Ellen Schlafer? Am I saying that right?
I did not. She had just left right when I arrived in Santa Fe. But of course, I know all about her. I've met her. And she has such an amazing legacy there.
Wonderful. So when you started at the Lyric in 2007 is when you and I met.
Yes.
And as I rediscovered yesterday, it was in stage management. I had completely forgotten that. I totally thought you were on the directing staff with me right from the get-go. So apparently it was destined to be, Matthew. But when in your brain, because you sort of took this step towards Santa Fe as an apprentice, then into stage management again at the Lyric, when does being a director come into your radar, or do you think it was always sort of there and it was just you putting the puzzle pieces together to make that happen?
Oh yeah, I always wanted to be directing.
Okay.
Always. I think it was sort of I didn't quite know how to get there, and felt that the path seemed a little less clear to me than I think I had thought it would be. And so stage management, I've always been interested in learning, and I've always been an advocate that as a director, but really working in opera, you want to understand what everyone does. And having actually worked in stage management, where you're backstage, you're working with the singers, you're dealing with props and costumes and, unions and the rehearsal flow and timing and stuff. There was something about doing that I really loved, because I could read the music, I could be there with the singers, I could make the magic. But I always knew I wanted to be telling the stories ultimately.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, Lyric. I mean, it's interesting because I only spent 1 year in stage management at Lyric before I switched into assistant directing. But I do remember there was an experience on Bohème where in Act 3, of course, it always snows. In Act 3, it has to snow. And I remember being off stage, getting ready to cue somebody, and they were in, the beautiful quartet, and it started to snow on my score. And I remember I looked up into the rafters and I could not see where the snow was coming from. And it was so magical. It was like reality and illusion had blended together, and theater actually was so alive, even though I was backstage, that I knew then, and I've always known since I was little, that this is it. This is for me, and making the invisible visible is what I am most passionate about.
That was gorgeous, and I'm glad we have this recorded, because I need to write that down in a quote somewhere sometime, Matthew. I want to get into your specific work in a second, but just before we talk about specific projects, everybody in the arts has a different path, but every single director I know has a different path. And you and I did something similar, which is coming up through the ranks of stage management. But talk a little bit more about how you even get from stage management positions. There's a whole series of steps in between stage manager and director, especially at the level that you're at now, which is, for the A houses across the country. Can you just talk about how you navigated that a bit?
Right. I mean, I would say that I went into the assistant directing path. And so as an assistant director, I think I assisted over 30 different productions at Lyric, San Francisco, and Santa Fe. So worked with, of course, the top directors in the world. And, I would say that as an assistant director, not only is it, part administrative and part artistic, but I really used it as an educational tool to understand how each director was directing, and to decide what I liked and what would work for me within my views on directing. And so I sort of used every production as almost like a class, master masterclass of watching a director work, working with that director, getting into their brain, and then obviously living in their staging and seeing all the interactions that are occurring between maestro and the singers and the director. And, you know, it's being an assistant director in that capacity at such high stake level enables you to then understand over time all the intricacies and facets that go into actually executing that once you become the director. And associate directing, of course, then you're remounting another director's work on their sets and with their staging. Again, it's great practice as a director to, you know, understand how to work with singers. And in particular in opera, unlike theater, because I've also directed a lot of theater, opera doesn't have a lot of time in the rehearsal room. And so figuring out how to execute things quickly, how to communicate quickly, and how to create a collaborative and safe environment has been something that I've spent a lot of time like observing before I ever became, you know, a director. But what's interesting is I did leave the industry. I think there was a point where I had assistant directed so much that I became only known as an assistant director. I knew it's just not, I didn't want to be stuck. And so I left the industry. And I also had questions on whether I belonged. You know, I was the only Asian American in the opera house for so long, and really am one of the few Asian American, maybe the only. You know, there are a couple others, but I'm like one of the only Asian American opera directors, and so there is a level of I had to leave just to see what else was out there because I knew I was passionate about so many other areas of the arts.
So just before we go forward, sorry, Francesco, one more thing. A question for you has come up on one of our other channels, so I can't display it right here. But Marvin Henderson is saying, for someone who is interested in changing their path to directing, what would you suggest them doing to gain experience? And Marvin, I think if I'm remembering correctly, you're a singer. So you're already in the arts and already around opera. So maybe from that perspective, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like interning, apprenticing, and observing are all really, really valuable and valid. I think part of it is when you're switching into a different, you know, career path, is it's, you know, you kind of have to start at the beginning and kind of learn and work your way up. I think a lot of individuals, especially when I was teaching at the university, I think, you know, students want to just skip all of the work and just go straight to like stardom or straight into the, you know, being the main conductor or the director. But actually, you know, even if it is meeting with a director, observing them, you know, or interning. I did do 2 fellowships at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival for 2 different years. So again, being able to watch others work and then be given tasks and you know, responsibility to, for example, execute the schedule or understand how the union rules work. I mean, those sorts of learning experiences, and it's not quick, right? I mean, I think that's the thing that, you know, yes, there maybe are some people who skip from 0 to hero in 2 seconds, but I think most of us have to go through a huge amount of work and, you know, a patient, slow road to get there. So I always am saying, hey, you know, as an artist, we have to figure out who are we as artists, what do we really want, and then going after that. And no one's path is the same. So you may take very circuitous routes, but every single person you meet is like a thread on your web, you know, your network web. And over time that, you know, that web keeps building and becomes so beautiful to enable you to then kind of shift into areas that you want to be.
Beautiful. Okay, for realsies now, Francesco.
Okay, for real now. Okay, good. Now, we really do, Matthew, we really do want people to learn about you as an artist and your viewpoint as an Asian American opera director. And if you could talk a little bit about what that means to you and how your path came to sort of you realizing what you wanted to express as that. I mean, as an Italian heritage person, I'm not super unique in opera because we invented it. So it's nothing, you know. So, but we're very curious to know, to explain a little bit about that. And of course, where you got to with, even if you want to include teaching and Wolf Trap and coming up to Ozawa, anything like that that would sort of highlight that perspective and what you want us to know about you as far as being an Asian American director?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's sort of like a blessing and a curse to be a person of color in this industry. I think that the curse is you get a little boxed in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that for a long time I rebelled against being called an Asian American director because I have, as a result, received so many offers to direct Butterfly, Pearl Fishers, and Turandot. Those are like the 3 shows that I get asked to do over and over and over again. But the issue that I have is like I of course am passionate about Butterfly, and I have a lot to say about it, being Japanese American, with a father who was, interned during World War II and the East-West conflict, et cetera, et cetera. Simultaneously, I don't want to only be boxed in. So it's interesting. I will say that I tend to kind of highlight the interdisciplinariness with which I approach directing, and the Eastern kind of stage direction minimalism that tends to be a hallmark of Ozawa, of my shows. There's a big joke that, usually we like start with props, and then over time I'm like, cut that prop, cut everything until there's like not a whole lot of props. Which also has meant that I've become sort of like a project runway director. So in the sense that, and this is actually really helpful, especially I'm sure it will be now, but for companies that are like, we have a very tight budget, we need you to make something really creative with not a whole lot. I'm really good at saying, okay, give me a chair, a piece of string, and a pencil, and I'll make like magic out of it, because that is sort of the minimalism. Is something that I really like gravitate towards, in addition to the fact that I love sort of having the audience have to use their own imagination and work within the context of engaging with the piece. I think that I've never been interested in the Starbucks version of opera, and I know that, Starbucks is wonderful, and I think traditional productions definitely have a place. But I know for myself that when I go to the theater, I want to be surprised. I want to not necessarily know where we're headed, and I want to, be transformed by the experience, not necessarily because I already know what that experience will be. And so I will say that as a director, I try to leave enough minimalism and space for the audience to be able to like almost own their own experience within the fabric of watching my shows. And it's interesting because I did leave opera for a little while. I ended up going down the route of teaching, and because of my interest in dance, music, theater, and visual art, and because I had so many friends outside of opera who were working in all these fields, I ended up starting a company. I started a nonprofit organization called Ozawa that was an incubator for collaborative art and artists. And so everything we created was new. Everything that we created was in a very like highly collaborative process where there wasn't a hierarchy. This is from a show called Fallen, which was based on Akutagawa's short story In a Grove, that many people might know from the film by Kurosawa, where one story is told multiple times from different people's perspectives. And in this, if you look at this, we have a koto musician in the back. There's an electronic. There's a guy sitting there, Mike Vernuski, at his computer. We actually had the two of them compose new music for this through the entire play. And we really did this on a shoestring budget, but it was a beautiful, powerful work that was a little experimental, but enabled everyone ownership within the room of creating their stories, creating the narrative, and fusing theater, music, and dance. Because of Ozawa, because of the work that I was doing through the company, it's interesting because then opera started to see that work in my website and in photos and asked me to come back to opera as a director. So for, I think that for so long I had been hitting, knocking on the door, hoping to get a gig, and I just wasn't getting any gigs after assisting for so long. So leaving, I could really focus on who I was as an artist and what my aesthetic was and what I wanted to say. And then that led to then the opera world kind of coming back and knocking. So Wolf Trap Opera was the first company that said, hey, we're doing some unusual works. We want you to do them. The first, they did a French double bill with Poulenc's Mamel and Mio's Le Pauvre Matelot. And then a couple years later, I did Gassman's La Paraceria, which is this picture here.
Mhm.
And these were totally new productions of very unusual works. And La Paraceria in particular is about the backstage world. Act 1, you meet the divas and the director and the librettist, and you meet this whole cast of characters. Act 2, you're in the rehearsal room, and then Act 3 is when they actually put on this performance that is a huge debacle and it totally falls apart, and a comedy. And it was so much fun and really enabled me to be free as a director versus feeling like I was getting stuck having to necessarily direct things the way that they had always been done, because these works are hardly done. And that then led to Ryan Taylor saw La Paraceria and asked me to come to Minnesota to do Romeo and Juliet. And this was a new production of Romeo and Juliet. And again, if you just kind of sort of look at that picture, I mean, it's very minimal. We took this idea of love and violence and the sort of warring families. We ended up creating these huge flowers. They were 2-dimensional, even though they look 3-dimensional, and a whole ceiling of swords that actually descended over the cast during the big market fight. But this was a beautiful way to practice, Project Runway, but also in grand opera form, and really start to figure out my aesthetic.
I love that. I am going to forever think of you as the opera runway style of director, but to the nth degree. I think that's so phenomenal. Talk a little bit about, because you and I both have experience with this, about what it's like to transition from being on the directing staff or the stage management staff at a company like Lyric Opera of Chicago to then start getting opportunities to then work with that company at a variety of projects.
Right. From Lyric, I was working with the Ryan Opera Center a lot, directing their Rising Stars concert and the sort of summer opera or scenes program. But the first directing, gig that I got at Lyric was Verdi's Nabucco. And that was such an unusual experience that really tested my skill set, because I was using their set from the 90s and the costumes from the 90s, but they wanted an entirely newly envisioned staged version of it. And I only had 1 week, so I had 6 days to stage it. So
Tons of time.
Tons of time, 6 hours a day minus the 30-minute breaks. So, and then I had 1 rehearsal per act with the chorus. So of course, each act has 2 scenes. So that was an hour and a half per scene. And then all of the cast was Russian, most of whom did not speak English. So it was sort of like one of those situations that I thought, I'm either going to completely fail, or everything that I have learned has set me up for this moment. Mm-hmm. What's so wild about it is that it occurred right after Christmas. We were teching during the Christmas break, and we found out that the scenery had not all survived time. Some of it had gone destroyed. And so there was, right before we entered the theater, the day before, they were like, hey, the following scenic things have been destroyed. You now need to re-envision what you were going to do. And so again, in terms of true Project Runway fashion, it's like, okay, what am I going to do? Do you have X, Y, and Z? Can we add projection? Can we do X, Y, and Z? So that we could instantly just walk in there and start to play with new tools.
So Alan's saying, if you ever need a RuPaul Drag Race consultant, our 17-year-old is an addict and watches all of them. And also on the other channel, Carl Race is saying, yes, Project Runway meets opera. It sounds like Nabucco, which is about as grand as it gets, is totally still falling into that category.
Yes, it's still Project Runway. Yes. And, again, it was such an interesting... I think there's a little video of this, is that, of course, I was, starting to become a spokesperson as a director and wanting to speak articulately. And what's so comical, they didn't do this on purpose, but I was interviewed, and then they decided not to use any of the video, and they turned me into a little cartoon. which maybe
Is that the clip that we have today, Matthew?
That is the clip that you have.
Let's show that really quickly, and then we can talk about how we all learn and grow as directors based on promotional material.
I mean, essentially, like the large scope of Nabucco is it's about the plight of the Israelites who are forced away from their homeland. They're exiled into Babylon following the destruction of the Temple of Solomon by Nebuchadnezzar, Nabucco, in 586 BC. So that's like the grand overview. And then, of course, because, you know, it's opera, there's a love triangle, there's madness, someone's struck by lightning, someone takes poison, someone dies, you know, the stuff of opera.
I love it. You know, the stuff of opera.
The stuff of opera, but I was mortified. When that came out, I was mortified because...
No.
I love it. I have to say, I love that they made that little cartoon spoken. You know, it makes opera lighter and not why so serious.
Yes.
Alan says he loves it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You know, I know we have like maybe one or two other little videos to show because I think that I was so mortified by that I ended up feeling like, okay, if I want to be taken seriously, I really need to make sure people understand who I am as an artist. Yeah. And so then I was really, in terms of my career trajectory, very kind of proactive about working on projects with interdisciplinary artists that had nothing to do with opera, while simultaneously focusing on the fact that I really was an Asian American artist. And if I wanted to champion the path for other people of color to walk into this industry, I needed to be a proper spokesperson who could not only talk about how to interpret this rep, but also what it means to do new opera that is about, you know, our communities. So a project, you know, that I think there's a music video that I directed with an artist named Alexa Gray and filmmaker John Wes. And these were two artists who were associated with Ozawa. And you know, I think that part of something that we are all grappling with is the intersectionality of who we are and what is, when you're looking at race and ethnicity and gender and sexuality and all of these intersections, how difficult that can be when you're trying to pave your path in an environment that feels like you should only be a specific thing. And so this music video that I did with them really was an exploration of all of that. Alexa Gray is a countertenor who simultaneously, you know, wrote their own music and produced this thing. And I was directing it, again, in true Project Runway fashion, about being like, great, we're going to be in this space, and we're really exploring all of the intersections of your identity and exploring the different polarity and opposites that can exist within the fabric of who you are, but still make up who you are. And that it's also okay to explore musical forms outside of what we think we necessarily feel comfortable with. So maybe we'll show that little clip.
Yeah, just before we do. So again, board member Diana Pena is going back to that Nabucco clip, is saying, that's great. That's what I want to do for Lucia.
Yes.
This is the show that we have coming up. And I will say, Diana has been pitching and my team has been figuring out how to do a promo that's like that, so that we're continuing to burst out of the, you know, traditional envelope of how to present opera. So yes.
Right. Yes.
I agree.
Yeah, because that's another thing, is that, right, we want to diversify audiences, and we want to attract people who maybe don't normally think of going to the opera as someone who maybe will end up come to the opera all the time. And 100%. I think that looking at all of these kind of forms and looking at, I mean, that Nabucco video, they did a great job. They did a great job about just saying, hey, we're going to make this fun.
So let's look at the other extreme now, and I'll show the clip from extreme. Alexa. Yeah. I think that looks so cool.
Absolutely.
It's from a 14-minute music video. I mean, it's like it was quite the
Wow.
undertaking because it
I
has this
love it.
huge narrative. But that was sort of, again, this idea that I think we as artists don't want to be boxed. And it's really important to really delve into all the aspects of who we are and what we want to be making.
Yeah, and Alexander, I agree. Great and so refreshing. And it's easy to get boxed in ways that I think you can't even conceive of sometimes, Matthew. I get labeled as the go-to grand opera director because so much of what I just happened to fall into early in my career was like Carmen and Bohème and Aida and these massive, massive shows. So then when I tell someone, I want to do something like the film version of Vinkensport that we did with the Texas Opera Alliance this year, people are like, what, a 7-person movie? That's not what you do. Well, yeah, let's keep playing with things that, break all of us as artists outside of the box.
Right.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. So let's go like another step further. Francesco, I know you've got some more questions about Matthew's career, just looking at new repertoire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even from there, from getting into the independent directing work and all of that, but also I did want to mention, and I want to make sure that we know, you were talking about teaching and blending that in, and I want you to go through how maybe teaching at Michigan also led through all of these things, and then important thing that we sort of talk about with everyone in the last little bit, where you were when COVID hit and how that affected you, and then getting to where you are now with Lyric Unlimited, all of those things. If you could take at least from Michigan, definitely
Michigan.
From Michigan.
Yes. Right. And this is so interesting again, because life is so unexpected and it takes so many turns.
Always.
I was just freelancing directing, but being an artist is not easy. And I know many, right? But it's so easy.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But like there's an instability to being a freelance artist and coming in to different companies throughout the year. And I will say that I went through a phase where I think I was directing like, I don't know, 10 or 11 shows a year. And I was like in a different city, dealing with, hundreds of new people, new environments, new rules, new X, Y, and Z. And it really was taking its toll a little bit. And so I started to think, okay, well, I've been teaching. How can I start to marry all of this together? And I landed a position at the University of Michigan as an assistant professor of music, in particular, their acting and movement instructor for the voice department, and also worked with the theater department and several other departments. And so I, for 3 years, the past 3 years, I lived in Ann Arbor. I was teaching while still freelance directing. It enabled me stability, but it also really enabled me to focus on the next generation, on what skills, individuals should be learning. What does it mean to be headed into the industry? How do you navigate that world? And trying to bring everything that I knew to these students. And it was a really beautiful 3 years. And then as fate would have it, I landed a roughly 9 new productions through 2023 that really, I thought, okay, I don't know if I can stay at the university. And so I left the university to head back into full-time freelancing. I was slated to do a new production of Fidelio at San Francisco, Cenerentola at Minnesota. I mean, there were so many things going on, and then COVID hit. So COVID hit, and I know that COVID has impacted everybody. And I think that no one has anticipated it would last this long. And I would say that the grieving process in the summer for me was really extensive because it was like the domino effect.
Yeah.
One after the next show got postponed or fully canceled. And actually all 9 of my productions disappeared. So by the time I hit July, I had left the university, left stability, and then I was living in a pandemic where every single one of my jobs disappeared. And it really made me question, like, what is my value as an artist? And I think every company, kind of their response to the artist in particular was different. You know, some paid artists, some didn't, some created new projects for artists, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I had a moment where I was a little saddened and disillusioned by the industry, in addition to the fact that Black Lives Matter had ignited, and the rose-colored glasses came off, and I thought, wait, what am I doing? And what am I actually saying if I say yes to a traditional butterfly with offensive costumes, or with bowing and things that I totally go against really my view of creating access and belonging? And how do I fit into this in terms of what is my value if I no longer have work and we're all just sort of waiting for years hoping to do a project? I think that what's so sad about currently what we're going through is just how many artists I think we are going to lose. I don't think that every artist has the privilege or means to be able to just wait until opera companies have fully come back. But I think that many are pivoting in different directions, right? And so we're seeing but with the pivoting, and this is where I think there's a lot of hope and optimism, is that with the pivoting in the pandemic, we're proving that we really are resilient, very resilient.
Yeah.
That is the nature of an artist, is to have to go through so much rejection in order to do what you love, what you're so passionate about. And that resiliency, I think, is really going to win out in the end when we're able to breathe life back into our form for live audiences. And so I've pivoted in a lot of different directions, but actually the big pivot, which was just started a week ago at the beginning of 2021. I am now a consultant and the interim director of Lyric Unlimited at Lyric Opera of Chicago. And Lyric Unlimited is the learning and community engagement wing of the company. And so again, it was this fortuitous marrying of everything that I do. It was like not only management related and administrative, but of course, really digging into how are we connecting to communities? What does learning mean? And how does that work within the fabric of a very large opera company? And how are we asking the questions when it comes to new rep and sort of where we're all headed post-pandemic?
That's awesome.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible.
But we got to keep going forward. I mean, I think that's the thing, it's a unusual time that we're living in, and by being resilient and moving forward and knowing too that we're going to have off days, we're going to have failures, there's going to be things that just do not go the way that we plan. But I think being malleable and knowing that the unexpected is out there, and making, again, this is a link to this idea of Project Runway, right? Of making magic out of unusual and unexpected situations. Feel like that is the thing I keep trying to champion, because you have no idea what sort of glimmer of life and hope and beauty of art can be created out of the most unusual and sometimes dire and sad circumstances.
On that topic, can you give us any little tips about what might be coming down the pike down at the Unlimited there? I'm just asking.
Kind of be like, no.
He can say no if he wants to, but he's on TV.
What I've been saying to everybody, I was like, I'm so new in the role. And look, I entered the role in the middle of the year, right? In the middle of their season, I'm entering this role, and during the middle of a pandemic. So I think a lot right now is adjusting to that. I think that there are some possible new exciting projects. And then also for me as a director, I think there's this interesting, again, confluence that I'm like, okay, I'm wearing lots of different hats. And so I just change the hats depending on what environment I'm in. But I think inevitably our experiences impact everything that we're doing every moment that we're doing it. And I know both of you, I mean, you're, really incredible artists. So everything, all of your artistry and all of your history comes into you leading the company. And I think that's so powerful and beautiful, because you get what goes into making the art.
I think is something that, I compliment Lauren on this all the time, but still everything that we just talked about, or that you just highlighted, getting from starting where you started as a musician, that helps you in all of that. and never even just saying that means discipline, practice, rehearsals, professionalism, integrity, discovery, curiosity, just by saying I play the clarinet.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you expand from that to having, swept the floors and set up the stands in Santa Fe, where now you can go and, do what you want to do and grow, and be the artist that you want to be, and do the things that you want to do. I just, a very long time ago, somebody said to me, it takes at least 10 to 15 years just to be comfortable on the podium. And I didn't realize that just meant being on the podium. That meant everything that goes along with the responsibility of stepping on that box.
Right.
And you just highlighted the same thing again, that, everything that you do helps you step on that podium or step into that directing role or behind that music stand with your notes on it or whatever it is. It's an important thing for everybody to know, that it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of putting together of a lot of versions of oneself to be able to stand, whether it's at Michigan, it's not like that's a small school, or lyric, how many times can you mention lyric opera in every facet that you have?
Well, I'm going to jump in because you've got some fans supporting your new move, Matthew. On our other channel, Nina Yoshida Nelson, who I know we both know, says, yay, congrats, Matthew. That's a perfect fit for both you and the lyric.
Absolutely.
Going back a bit to when you were talking about what it takes to be an artist, Carl Race is saying, oh, I can so relate. Going back to showing the Alexa clip, Karen J. Foster is saying Blade Runner the opera. I would put that on my tombstone, like creating Blade Runner the opera. That's amazing. And then over on this channel, we're getting a hello from Stefano.
Oh, hello.
With. And actually, Sue Turner here is a donor and a patron at Opera San Antonio. She's been joining us for many, many of our events during the pandemic. She also loves Lyric Opera of Chicago and much work, and has seen many productions there. So you've got a new fan, Matthew, who's going to look out for your work. Matthew, I think you're extraordinary. I always have. I think you've been a phenomenal guest today. And man, if anybody's going to break through the pandemic and come out the other side with guns blazing, it is going to be Matthew Ozawa. That is my prediction for the future. And I know you're, with all of these hats, as you say, with all of these hats on, I know you're extraordinarily busy carving a new path forward for yourself and for the art form. So from Francesco and I, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, my friends.
Time today to be with us, our patrons and our viewers, and just sharing the background on who you are and your extraordinary relevance to the art form today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Oh my goodness, of course. So for everybody watching, I want to say thank you to you as well, whether you're watching live or if you're joining us after on either our YouTube or Facebook channel. We will be back with Beyond the Production with another guest in 2 weeks, same time, always on Fridays at 12 p.m. Central Time. And we hope to be able to continue sharing this series with you throughout 2021, because artists like Matthew are just so incredible. And there's so many, many more stories to be told from everybody's perspective on what it takes for this incredible art form to continue in this incredible new era that we find ourselves in. So Matthew, we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you again to you. Thank you to our viewers. And we will be sure to see everybody again in another 2 weeks. Have a wonderful Friday afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.